Okay.
Can you hear me?
All right. So as we're starting the video, we can kind of review what we were talking about practicing what you call informal, or it would be off the cushion,
Uh-huh.
and you're going about today with
Yeah.
new breathing. So go
Well,
ahead and take it from there.
I was doing the long breath and building up the pity until you get to these peak points where it feels like you're just like your legs are bulging is what it feels like, or your arms are bulging. It feels like you're and started hearing like loud humming. I started like, but it felt in unison with the pity. It was definitely kind of the same thing. Um, it's the kind of thing where I started wondering, is it something that's always there that I'm not able to recognize, or is it a sort of a mix between the, oxygenating the body and then also having, more perception going on? But
I would say that it would be both,
hmm
and both in the sense that as you're waking up the body, energizing the body, that first off, you're beginning to recognize things that were already there, but that were probably at a low level. But now that the body is being oxygenated, it's waking those things up that were there. But when I say waking it up, means up to a level to where they can be recognized, to be seen,
hmm
rather than at an unconscious or subconscious level, which meant that basically the reptilian brain, with all the work it has to do to keep us alive, is kind of ignoring that stuff. But now
yeah.
that you're oxygenating the system and getting the frontal cortex into paying attention to what's going on,
hmm
then that data is kind of available to the frontal cortex, basically through the reptilian brain. But that the second part of the question would be that yes, as you're beginning to oxygenate the body, that new things are beginning to happen. And that the new things that are beginning to happen is, well, one, you could call it a purification. That stuff that was stored in the body, sort of like if you're in survival mode, then, how to say it? If you were in survival mode with your job so that the only thing that you cared about was getting that job done,
hmm
then your house is going to get dirty. You may not even take
hmm
baths. That your only interest is in that job. So inside of the human body, that same thing is going on. That because the reptilian brain is kind of in survival mode more often, a whole lot more often than it ought to be, it doesn't take the trash out.
hmm
And the trash needs to be taken out. We need to have some space in there. One of the kinds of trash would be broken down amino acids that have done their function and are left in the blood. But also, there's a lot of other chemicals that can be released through the blood that helps purify the blood. Breathing helps purify the blood, but in doing so, that means that where the blood used to be kind of polluted when it went through various areas as a trash collector, it didn't quite collect all the trash.
hmm hmm
But now that there's room on the trash truck,
Well,
because there's room on the trash truck, now that the whole body is beginning to get more purified,
uh-huh.
and that opens
Uh,
up stuff that allows you to understand it better. And so
I
your
gotcha.
job now will be to start to experiment with. um, the various parts of the body and how they feel when they're being oxygenated.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Well,
So the answer to your question would be both.
okay. That's how I kind of felt about it. Um, anyway, so I did about an hour set, but just felt so good that I was like, well, I'm not gonna quit. I'm just gonna keep it because you just it doesn't take as much effort to keep it going once you have the engine started, so to speak. I can only speak. I would the analogy I would think of is starting a fire with kindling. You get
Mhm.
it started. You blow on it, and then you start putting wood on it, and
Hmm.
it's not as time consuming to just throw wood on it.
The
And
same thing is
so
true about pushing off a car on a relatively flat surface.
yeah,
In the
and
beginning,
so
you have to push really hard and it doesn't even move. But once you get it rolling, you can just push with one hand and you can make it go.
right, yeah, and it's not. I'm finding that I'm falling more into a natural breathing pattern that how do I say when I was doing it, I've been doing it all day, and at first I'd have to do the deep breaths. I'd have to do a lot of deep breaths, which would sort of make it hard to be out carry on a conversation or something like that. But as the day went on, I was surprised that I just kept I never kind of lost sight of staying in that place. And
You're actually correct. Here's something that I have heard and that I'm not sure of where, but I'm fairly sure that it would not come from Vila Maramsi, who spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka. But the word in Sri Lanka with Anapanasati is don't try to control the breath.
mm,
And
okay.
that some of the teachers are teaching that way. But in fact, if you look at it the correct way, controlling the breath actually makes Anapanasati easier.
Yeah, right.
That if you're not trying to control the breath, then you're not paying in really as much attention to it as you ought to.
And that's what I wanted to say is that if I'm controlling the breath, there's no it's completely wholesome. You couldn't you're in a completely wholesome state of mind constantly. You couldn't, you know, there I mean, what could be more wholesome than, getting high on your own on oxygen, on your own breath.
Exactly so.
But
And that high, by the way, has
uh-huh.
various qualities that um, are, let us say it this way, whatever chemical systems that the brain is using to
Uh-huh.
create dopamine is going to need oxygen to do that process. Whatever the brain needs to do to manufacture serotonin, it's going to need oxygen to do that.
Uh-huh.
And so when you're oxygenating the body, you're actually setting things up to feel good.
Yeah. That's
And if you look at the way that the Anapanasati Sutta is put together and the various parts of it, you can say, okay, yeah, right, the breath, even though they call it Anapanasati and make that as a great big label, it seems to be that the breathing is the secret.
that's
The
and
secret ingredient is the name of the sutta.
I was listening to the suttas, and it just happened to it's a 16-hour long book collection of suttas that's an audio version. And I just happened to be at it's about the middle of the book, the part about Anapanasati and the Anapanasati suttas. And it was a lot of it was like, oh yeah, because he starts it by saying, what essentially, what is the key to all of this, to all of everything? I can't recite it, but what is the key to everything? And it comes back to the breath. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
he's just explicitly saying that, and they do use the word train in you know most of it, and it's like, oh, this is key. It's just been mind blowing that the key is the breath. I mean, I you know
Who is the
uh,
author of this series?
that was it's the most popular series of translations. It was Bhikkhu Bodhi, I think. Bhikkhu Bodhi.
Oh, you're talking about listening to actual suttas being uh, read.
It's yes, so it's an anthology
Okay.
of suttas. This is a collection. He's done translations of several collections of suttas, but
Mm-hmm.
this one was it's like the greatest hits, I guess. It's 16 hours of like the key suttas, or it's a collection of suttas, I guess. So yeah, it was an audiobook. Um, but I think one thing that he talked about was becoming, or and that when I had a brief moment where I felt like I would slip back from the breath, and that felt like becoming. I was like, is this what he's talking about? Sinking back down into the reptilian brain? Like, is that
Mm-hmm.
what we're talking? And so that was sort of an insight for me to just sort of see that, and then realize to have the aversion to it, like the real aversion to it, to
Mm-hmm.
to sinking back down into it.
Wow. Well, you're following exactly what is specified very clearly in the Anapanasati Sutta and explained so very well by Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Is the whole point is with oxygenating the body and bringing it up. And the oxygenation process is actually a winning process. It's something that you're doing, you know you can do it, and that you know how successful it is. So, with that breathing also comes the piti, the rapture of success. And then we bring on the stability of the sukha, which is actually the opposite now of dukkha, being in a state of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get into that state of satisfaction, now we're going to do whatever it takes to stay in that state of satisfaction, including not allowing that becoming that you were talking about, or falling back into basically the dialogue between the the super ego or the parent ego state and the child ego state, and we're bringing the adult into the conversation, and
Mm.
the adult's the actual boss here. Now, in it's kind of funny that Freud 100 years ago and Byrne 50 years ago, and now even modern TA people are putting this out now, that it's the adult ego state that should be in charge. And yet, most of the time, it's either the child ego state or the super ego or the parent. Now, what we mean by the parent ego state is all of the ways that things should be. Our rights,
Mm-hmm.
rules, rituals, our procedures, our whole society, the ways we're supposed to feel, and all of that stuff is based in storage that the Buddha would call sankhara. And he talks
Mm-hmm.
about it as verbal sankhara and emotional sankhara, and those are the parent ego state and the child ego state, and it's all stored up.
Getting the baby here.
Uh-huh. But the real joy is for us to suspend all of those rules, suspend our beliefs in the way that things should be done, And in the process, we stop torturing ourselves to get into the way that we should be doing things based upon our set of rules.
Right.
So by turning the rule systems off, we can now relax and let the child be comfortable and happy. But with the adult working correctly, in the sense of, aha, I caught you, and bringing on this great joy. So it's basically that we change the dynamic within the mind. The normal dynamic is between the parent or the superego and the id or the child state. But now what we're doing is that we're putting the adult in charge, which is the frontal ego, the huge processor of the human brain, and the emotional system, so that the adult is now in charge of the emotional system, not the old set of rules that we learned when we were a child. And that's real freedom,
Right. And
as opposed to the becoming of falling back into doing the way that we should do and resenting it.
yeah, and part of me still is is it feels like I'm attached or trying to hang on to it or grasping, but as long as as long as I can get up in the morning and take deep breaths, then it's nothing that I can lose. I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just wondered if I was doing it correctly, because we had just talked about doing it in practice, but it just really quickly caught on to me that I just need to keep doing this indefinitely.
Uh-huh. All
This
day long.
goes beyond practice.
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, it goes from practice into performance. Now, if you were thinking of these breathing exercises along with Anapanasati as the actual practice of a musical instrument, then that instrument, when you're in the sitting meditation, would be the private practice. But when you get up and work around, what you're calling an informal practice, with what I would call performance, that you're actually out there performing Anapanasati now, that you have to keep track of it. But eventually it becomes a habit of itself, so that you just kind of naturally are joyful. You're kind of naturally comfortable. You're kind of naturally breathing well. And this is what we
Right.
would call the playful stage, where things just happen so nice. Everything is wonderful. I don't have to work at being happy anymore.
Yeah. It's uh, it's great. It's what was missing. It's uh, it's like I had um, mm, uh, uh, the looking for the right word. Mm, the I want to say receding. The what is the Buddhist word? The uh, um, whenever you sort of break a fetter or something like that. Uh, um, but well, there was just this there was, I wouldn't call it apathy, but there was just this sort of uh, mm, boredom, or I don't know. It was something that kept me sinking back into old habits and old habit patterns, habitual
Mm-hmm.
patterns, and um, like you say, the reptilian brain. It just, you can feel it when you start doing the breath. You start to be really mindful of what happens when you finish, and then you don't, and then you just go back to your reptilian breathing. You're very, because your mind is so bright and so alive, and everything's so alive. You just become very aware that it's leaving, and you're going
Hmm.
back, and you become more and more aware of that transition until you just don't want to. It's like I don't want to go
Don't want to
back
go
there.
back into that state. So you start
Mm-mm.
doing a bit of breathing again. Yes, I know.
It's it's like you're burning down your own house, and you just leave yourself no option but to jump to something else. um,
Yes, that's exactly right. Another way of saying what you just said is that when you realize what suffering there is or what unsatisfactoriness there is in living our lives that way, why haven't we been able to tell people that? Well, the answer is that, yeah, every yoga studio, every psychologist, everybody keeps telling people what they need to do, and nobody wants to take the advice because we're too much in the habit. And so then the other guys say, well, you give us money and we'll fix you.
mm,
Like the religions and the governments and the big business and the education, they all say, oh, well, you can't do it yourself, so we'll fix you. Pay us money.
what and to that point, what has confused me about it is like, why can't we just start with this? You know, it's like, but I guess, but then I realized that there were certain negative feelings that would come up when I'd start doing the breathing technique that I don't think my in my mind state, you know, a few months ago, that I would have been able to get over. I wouldn't have been able to get over these negative feelings that were coming up and then keep doing it. I wouldn't have had the persistence and the dissociation with the stories that I would tell myself about those feelings that would
Uh-huh.
keep me from continuing, right?
Uh-huh. Absolutely. But now what's happening is that shraddha that we've talked about,
Mm,
that confidence
mhm,
that starts to build up through success. Once you start having success and you recognize, because success feels really good.
mhm. Yeah. It
Being
feels like the
successful,
lion,
happy.
you know.
Exactly. And so we would rather be in that state of success and in that state of wanting to be successful.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's I just I don't know where to go from here with practice.
Well, now that you've reached this state, where would you want to go?
I I mean, I want to stay here wherever, I want to stay here and go from here.
All
So,
right.
see,
Well,
yeah.
with if the staying here, there's nowhere to go from here other than staying here. But the staying here will get deeper as you practice. It gets better. Part of the betterness is it gets easier to do because it becomes a habit.
Hmm.
But also the more you do it, the more successful you feel. You feel like, oh, I actually can do this.
Hmm.
You'd be surprised at how many thousands of people who, let us say, become monks or whatever, but they still have the loser's attitude. Oh, I may never become enlightened. In fact, that whole idea of the failure gives us the need for a belief in rebirth, in reincarnation. It's the loser's mentality. Oh, I can't do it. It's going to take me so long.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
now you're recognizing, oh no, you're doing it now.
Hmm.
Now's the time to do it and to keep doing it. That this is good stuff. Because right now, let us put it this way, your only option right now is to quit at any particular moment, go back to the way that you were, and continue on with your drudgery. Or you can come out of it and live your life the way that you want to, happily.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
So don't set up goals for some kind of high enlightenment,
Mm-hmm.
because
Just
then to set that goal up is what comes next means that I'm not satisfied with what things are like now. And that's the whole point, is to getting ourselves into a state of satisfaction.
it's almost at this point, it's like I'm so satisfied, and I haven't really integrated that feeling into my life, that it's like uh, I, I can't really even think in, future or past right now. It's like I can't. I'm just right. I'm right in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's yeah,
You will do
it's
well
something
there.
else. Okay.
You will do well in
Yeah.
the moment.
All
One
right.
moment at a time, a happy moment, one after another. What else could people want? I don't know, but they want all kinds of things, and they wind up being dissatisfied. And all you have to do is make this state of satisfaction for yourself. So, which one is that? That's the infant?
That's the infant. Yeah.
So, how
He's
old
not.
is he now? About a month?
Oh no, he's about 3 months now.
3 months already.
Yeah.
Wow. Time didn't fly, it jumped.
Yeah, and I just started. I'm home with him for 16 weeks, and I think it's going to be a lot better
All right, we'll
than
teach
it
him
was.
Anapanasati.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that out. Um, anyway,
Well,
just
this has been a good check in.
yeah,
You
just thought
keep
I'd check
going.
in.
All
Okay,
right. Just keep doing it. You're doing fine.
okay, all right. I'm gonna keep
Insights will
doing it.
continue. You'll begin to figure more and more things out, but the state of mind
Uh-huh.
is that joy. So
Yeah,
become satisfied that this is good. This is all we need.
this seemed like a key sort of breakthrough, though. Just figuring out. It's so simple. Just keep breathing. All right. All right. Talk
All
to you
right.
later, Dhammarato. Bye.
Okay. See you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.